are kind of working out a schedule of how we'll approach each week in the college football season, what we'll talk about on each day here on the Morning Pit, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Obviously, we have the mailbag on Friday, so get your questions in at Panther-Lair.com, and we'll answer as many as we can tomorrow. But I think on Thursday, at least for this week, we're just going to kind of jump around on a bunch of different topics. I got a handful of different things I want to talk about. Some basketball news that is very important and relevant. Some interesting recruiting stuff on guys in Pitt's 2026 recruiting class and how they've been doing in their seasons so far. A couple other little news and notes. And then I think, what I think are the keys for Pitt on Saturday against Central Michigan. So we'll probably bounce around. This might be the usual thing we do on Thursdays. We'll see. Some Thursdays we might have more things to talk about than others. Maybe there'll be some news that we discuss or whatever. But for now, I think we'll just bounce around. So let's hit on a bunch of different stuff. Basketball, recruiting, football, and whatever else might come to mind here on the Thursday edition of the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, Thursday here on the Morning Pit, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Covering a bunch of different ground here on the Thursday edition. And like I said, we got a little basketball news to start it off. That's right. Roman Cialepa, the big Australian freshman, is finally here. We posted on the message boards yesterday at Panther-Lair.com. Everybody's been asking. People have been wondering. He was supposed to be here 2 weeks ago. Then he was supposed to be here last weekend. He is finally in town. A series of, visa issues and travel. It's a long ways away. Australia is a long way from Pittsburgh, and so it takes a little while to make that trip. And, in 2025, sometimes it could be a little bit tougher to get into the country than it may have been in other years in the past. I know Pitt was hoping to get him in by August, but ended up being this week. I don't know exactly what day he arrived, but he is here now. So Roman Cialepa, part of the Pitt basketball program officially, and we can kind of think about what that means. Probably, I don't think him being here changes what we think he may or may not do with the team or for the team or what kind of role he might play. I think it's, all largely the same until they actually start practicing. We get a sense of how he fits in. I think he's a power forward. I guess he could potentially play the three in like a really big lineup with Cam Corrin and Deshaun Jackson. My guess is he lines up as a four more, and you get, Cam Corrin kind of splitting time between the 4 and the 5, and, splitting time with Jackson at the 5, splitting time with Cialepa at the 4, and you see how it kind of works out from there. The thing is, he's a freshman. And I think for all the rave reviews that have been out there, there have been quite a few reviews that are like, he's a freshman and he's raw and, he's getting by on sort of brute force, maybe not as much touch or finesse to his game yet. Some of those things he needs to learn. And I'm not comparing him to Steven Adams, but I sort of remember Steven Adams was fine as a freshman. He contributed very little offensively. He was, really good on defense and shot blocking, and you sort of got whatever you could get out of him based on raw talent alone. And his game, whatever it would ultimately develop into, developed in the NBA after he was at Pitt for 1 year. Now, I don't know if Roman Cialepa is going to leave Pitt after 1 year, but it sort of feels like, well, you get whatever you can get out of him on the raw talent side, because he's pretty raw and undeveloped. And that's, I guess it's just a way of saying, like, I don't think he's going to come in and be the savior. You know what I mean? I don't think he's going to come in and be the guy who turns this program's fortunes around, at least for the 2025-26 season. So it is what it is, I guess, as they say. But he's here, so, concerns on that regard or concerns on that front are no longer founded. They are now officially unfounded because Roman Cialepa has arrived. Talking of other young people flipping over to the football recruiting side, there were some interesting results over the weekend from Pitt's 2026 recruits. These are the guys that are in senior year of high school. They'll be at Pitt next year. They're committed to Pitt already. And there's a handful of guys. I mean, Jim does a great job updating every week on how guys do and what they do. You got to check it out, the Under the Lights feature. We've been doing it for years. It's one of my favorite things to read every week because you just kind of see what the recruits are up to and how they're doing and how they're performing. And there were some interesting results this past weekend. Pitt's got two quarterbacks in this 2026 recruiting class, Angelo Renda and Corey Daly, both out of Texas, both intriguing guys. Renda's a little shorter, Daly's a little taller. They can both move around okay. Renda's a better runner, maybe Daly's a better thrower, but they're both, pretty intriguing prospects, I think, with a lot of potential, and you can see the appeal for Cade Bell in both of those guys. And it's interesting, they both played their first games over the weekend, and Angelo Renda completed 16 of 24 passes. That's not bad. For 248 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. So 248, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 10 yards per attempt. That's not bad. 2 picks and 3 touchdowns. That's not great. Corey Daly went 29 of 54, lower percentage, a lot more passes, threw for 320 yards, 4 touchdowns and no picks, and he also rushed for 74 yards. Impressive, right? One of those guys must have won their I will tell you, one of those guys won their game and one of those guys lost their game. And it's not the guys you're thinking. Angelo Renda, who threw 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, won his game for South Lake Carroll. Corey Daly with 320 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks, 74 rushing yards. His team lost like 70-35. Seguin not getting off to a great start there. Seguin High School in Texas. Not a great start to the 2025 season, but pretty impressive stats for Corey Daly with 320, 4 touchdowns, no picks, and then 74 rushing yards. In Ohio, Westerville South, Isaac Patterson, safety prospect, I just think has a impressive stat line so far. He's got 2 games played. He's caught 5 passes. Now, he's a safety prospect, but he plays both ways for Westerville South. 5 catches for 184 yards and 2 touchdowns in 2 games. He's also got 50 kick return yards, 54 punt return yards. He's averaging 144 all-purpose yards per game. Pretty impressive stuff from Isaac Patterson. I think this last game he caught like 2 passes for 124 yards or something like that. He's a playmaker. And, you see, he's at safety, but I think you see it out of Pitt's linebacker recruits as well. They're recruiting these guys who are really good athletes, who are playmakers on both sides of the ball. And Patterson doing really well on defense, but he's also making a lot of plays on offense. And then locally, there are a number of things that were interesting. Reston Lehman, the defensive end recruit for Pitt, had a pick 6 for Peters Township, so that was an impressive play. But the guy that I really like keeping an eye on, the guy whose highlights I like watching, the guy who I think is just a lot of fun, is Deron Barksdale. I think the most recent commit in the class, Steel Valley guy, and he's a guy who, a lot of these schools, at a lot of schools in the lower classifications, I mean, we saw it with Paris Ford at Steel Valley, right? They play both ways, and they make a lot of plays on both sides of the ball. And I guess it's not just at lower classifications. I shouldn't say that. But Deron Barksdale is out there doing what Paris Ford did at Steel Valley. He's out there doing what Cruz Brookins did at Steel Valley. He's making plays. Through 2 games, Barksdale's rushed for 268 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He's got 101 kick return yards, 17 punt return yards. He's got 386 all-purpose yards through 2 games. That's just under 200 all-purpose yards per game. He's also the quarterback. He's thrown like 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions or something like that. But mostly, Steel Valley's plan is put the ball in Deron Barksdale's hands and let him make plays, which was the plan with Cruz Brookins. It was the plan with Paris Ford. It was the plan with Deron Barksdale's brother, Donald Barksdale. Let your best players make plays, and that's what Deron Barksdale is doing. Now, he'll be a safety when he gets to Pitt, or a corner, a safety, a defensive back. But right now at Steel Valley, he's just, again, almost 200 all-purpose yards per game. I think you like seeing that. This is something that I've said a bunch, I feel like, in the last few months, particularly talking about Sean Lee, the freshman corner at Pitt from Harrisburg. There's something about those guys who are just outstanding athletes on both sides of the ball, and Pitt likes to put them in these defensive positions. You know what I mean? Like they Cruz Brookins at safety. Kyle Lewis was an offensive playmaker. Braylon Lovelace did everything for his team. MJ Devonshire a couple of years ago. Like, they like these kind of guys, and I can see why. They're certainly not. They're not the only team and the only coaching staff that likes these kinds of players, but I can see why they like these players, because they're clearly their team's best athletes, right? They are the best players on the field. And so you're putting him in the position to make the biggest impact. And on defense, that means you put him wherever it like sort of fits body type wise. Braylon Lovelace made sense as a middle linebacker. Jordan Bass made sense as a safety or something. Bass was another one, a really good offensive playmaker who Pitt recruited for defense. And then on offense, you just get them the ball however you can. Braylon Lovelace put up a ton of offensive stats. Cruz Brookins, Paris Ford, now Deron Barksdale, and Sean Lee. Who I keep bringing this up sort of in reference to Sean Lee, because at Harrisburg they were like, you're the best player on this team. You're the best athlete on this team. We're just giving you the ball. Go out and make plays. And he did, and put up tons of yards, throwing, rushing, and then making a lot of plays on defense. Just an outstanding athlete in that way. I don't know how Deron Barksdale is going to end up, stacking up next to some of those guys we talked about, Brookins or Paris Ford, or even Sean Lee, who got out there as a true freshman on Saturday against Duquesne at corner. I don't know how Deron Barksdale is going to compare, but you like seeing that in high school players. And then, probably the best part is like their film is really fun to watch, because usually those guys are just finding lots of creative and crafty ways to get the ball downfield. And they usually end up producing some pretty fun film. So go check it out. Look for Deron Barksdale's highlights. We mentioned Sean Lee. He was the first true freshman to get in on offense or defense in the Duquesne game. He came in and played at cornerback 1 or 2 drives into the second half. And I mentioned him, we talked to him a little bit yesterday in the South Side. You got the video up here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And I mentioned him because I have a feeling, like, I wonder if we're going to see him more on Saturday against Central Michigan, if only because I kind of wonder about Tamon Lynham and Rashad Battle. We saw Rashad Battle come off the field. Actually, the same play where Braylon Lovelace got hurt on Saturday against Duquesne. Rashad Battle also kind of limped off. Tamon Lynham came in for Battle, played about a snap, and then he was replaced by Sean Lee. And Battle and Lynham did not come back on the field again for the rest of the game. I'm not going to ask Pat Narduzzi about it. I know he doesn't like to talk about injuries, and I'm not, basing this on any kind of info. I'm as I said about the injuries at the beginning of the week, I'm just going on everything that 53,000 other people could see, 53,005 other people could see in the stadium. The Rashad Battle limped off, and Tamon Lynham left after one more play and didn't come back in. So I kind of wonder if we're going to see a lot of Sean Lee and Shadarian Harrison, and maybe even Zion Ferguson, Nigel Maynard, and maybe some of those guys, Rashawn Murray, at corner this weekend against Central Michigan. Now, speaking of Central Michigan, and speaking of those corners, what are the keys to winning this game? What are the keys for Pitt on Saturday? Since we have the mailbag tomorrow, we can do some keys to the game here on Thursday. And number one, you got to stop the run. You can't get so caught up looking to stop the run that you don't pay any attention to their pass game. And this is where some of the responsibility is going to be on those corners to make sure they keeping the receivers in front of them. Don't let them, don't get so caught up trying to stop the run that you let the receivers get behind you and then they run play action or an RPO or something and take a shot downfield. But this is going to be a run-stopping game. Central Michigan had 56 rushing attempts against San Jose State last week. Now, they only scored 1 touchdown. Central Michigan scored 1 touchdown and I think 3 field goals against San Jose State. So I don't think they're necessarily an overwhelming opponent or something you should be all that intimidated about. But what they want to do is run the ball. They'll run it with their quarterbacks. They'll run it with their running backs. They'll run it with everybody. You've got to stop the run. Now, that should play into Pitt's hands. Pat Narduzzi even said that on Monday, that he feels like it plays into their hands. Don't get cocky there, kid. But it should, because if there's anything this defense wants to do, it's stop the run. If there's anything this defense is good at, it's stopping the run. They did a great job against the run, on Saturday when they played Duquesne, and I think they'll probably be ready for it here on this coming Saturday. Now, one of the other keys, consistently stop the run, and with your defense. And then one of the other keys along with that is to get a lead. All right, Central Michigan wants to run the ball all the time. I don't get it doesn't seem like they're all that comfortable throwing the ball. So if you can get a lead of a couple scores, they're going to have to come out of that. They're not going to be able to sit back and just hand it off and run the quarterback powers and things like that. San Jose State had a lead, but it was never more than a couple of points, so they were never able to force Central Michigan out of the run game in that game last weekend. If Pitt can get a lead early on, get ahead by a couple of touchdowns, 2 or 3 scores, you might be able to force Central Michigan out of what it wants to do, and then that's playing into your hands because they're probably not all that great at passing. I think they clearly see running the ball as their strength. It's probably what they're best at, and if you can force them to have to throw, that should play into your hands, create opportunities for the pass rush, create opportunities for takeaways, particularly in the secondary, maybe with those corners, getting a chance to get their hands on the football, or maybe the safeties as well. So when it comes to getting an early lead, obviously Eli Holstein has to play well. He has to do like he did in the, when he, finished the game against Duquesne, 9 of 11 for 178 and 3 touchdowns. He needs to play like that. And the other thing Pitt can take advantage of, and this is my other key to the game. You got to stop the run. You got to get the big lead. And then, key to this game, largely because it was a big part of Saturday's game, and probably a part we haven't talked as much about, is the field position. Pitt had great field position against Duquesne. I think their average starting position was the Pitt 43. Duquesne's average starting position was its own 28. So you're talking about 15-yard difference between, in average starting field position. I think Pitt had 5 possessions that started in Duquesne territory, not counting Desmond Reed returning a punt for a touchdown. 5 possessions they actually, where they actually ran the possession. 5 of them started in Duquesne territory. Duquesne only had 1 possession start in Pitt territory, and that was after the interception in the end zone. And Pitt, I think, capitalized on that field position. That was a big part of the game. It's probably part of why they lost the time of possession, because they weren't really, they didn't have long fields to cover on a lot of these scoring drives. But winning the field position, I think that's a good way to get up on a team by a couple scores real quick. If you want to try and force them out of what they're comfortable doing offensively, that's a good way to do it, is if you can get good field position and score quickly and really kind of make it tough on them and make them uncomfortable, which comes back to the matter of Desmond Reed and Kenny Johnson returning kicks and punts. I think that's the value in it. And I think you saw the value in it. I think you saw the value in it on Saturday, that, they were able to get a lot of good returns. I mean, they had a ton of punt return and kick return yardage against Duquesne. Let me actually bring up that stat real quick because I have the stat book in front of me. Punt returns, they had 143 yards on punt returns, 78 yards on kick returns. So you're looking at 221 return yards on punt returns and kick returns. I mean, that's huge. That goes a long way. And it's not like you were getting a lot of kickoffs anyway, because Duquesne only scored once and had the start of the second half kickoff. And so get all those extra yards. See if you can take that success, because I also kind of think that Duquesne's punter stinks. Excuse me, or he stunk on Saturday. He had a really low kick that Desmond Reed was able to get to with 15, 20 yards of full speed running right at the coverage unit. And then the rest of his punts were all like shanks and out of bounds and things like that, because they were kicking away from Desmond Reed. Might be the upside of, having such a dangerous returner back there. And then Kenny Johnson went back and he started getting good returns out of it as well, in addition to his long kick returns. So that's the advantage of having those guys back there, is you have the threat of getting a big return, and you also have, and you also have that threat sort of leading to bad decisions in the kicking game. Punting away from guys, kicking away from guys, it goes out of bounds, it's a shanked punt or whatever it may be. And I think all of that is advantageous. It plays into the field position game, which Pitt won pretty considerably on Saturday. So I think that's another key here. This Saturday is what happens in the field position game. So stop the run, get the early lead, and win the field position again. and this should be a real comfortable win for the Panthers. All right, mailbag tomorrow, so get your questions in on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, and then check out all of the Pitt coverage that you can possibly handle. Panther-Lair.com, and then make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We always like more subscribers, so do that, and then you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. All right, thanks for tuning in today. It's Thursday, folks. We almost made it to the end of the week. Have a good Thursday. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt mailbag right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.